On tonight's episode, Fred Zinkie of Yahoo Sports joins us for a comprehensive discussion on trading strategy, how to trade, when to trade, fairness of trades, and of course, how risk fits into the equation. Plus, we will have our waiver wire picks, pitcher preview, and an extended mailbag. Beat the Shift is next. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I actually went into the city, into my office for the first time in 16 and a half months. Incredible day here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I've been doing that in the medical field for the past year or so. I missed like 3 months because of COVID, but otherwise, everything's going smoothly. Still doing the proper precautions because we don't want to have any sort of new outbreak or more of an outbreak than what's going on, because unlike football, baseball doesn't give that stiff of penalties when it comes to, testing positive for COVID.
Yeah. You never know what. Yeah, you never know what's going to go on in the world in the winter. Hey, listen, flu season is there, and there's always risk that COVID will increase in the winter, and I surely hope it doesn't. I surely hope we don't go backwards, but I'll take what I can, and great to be back in the office. Well, we've got a great episode today. I want to bring on the show from Yahoo Sports, Fred Zinkie. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. And we brought you on to talk about trading in our strategy section today, all about trading. Fred does quite a bit of trading in his expert leagues, and I'm sure home leagues as well. He's pretty good at it, so pick the right guy to talk about it. And just to throw out very, very generally to you to start, what is your general trading philosophy?
I say my general trading philosophy in the first half of the season is to try to acquire what I perceive to be an uptick in value, even if that uptick's very minor, but an uptick in value. And then my trading philosophy in the second half of the season is to attack categories that I think are necessary for me to move up in the standings. So I kind of have two different philosophies at two different points in the season.
My gosh, that was exactly the same answer I was about to give, by the way. Exactly.
Yeah,
I think
I think that's really the best way to go about it. And some people, when you talk about, oh, I want to get value, some people will say, well, that means you have to rip the other person off in a deal, but it doesn't, because the great thing about fantasy baseball is that we don't all agree on how valuable the players are. And that's why we see different waiver wire bids every week in fab leagues, and that's why we see people drafting different teams out of different spots throughout March. So it's actually not that hard to find trades that both people are quite satisfied with, because we all value players differently, and our values of each player go up and down throughout the season.
Right. And the only thing I'll add to that is that it's a little bit harder these days to trade in terms of overall value, because, as projections come more commonplace, I think that people's perceptions of players are getting a little bit closer to another. I know for me, I'm doing the ATC projections. A lot of people have my book, so it's hard. And and also when you're coming right out of a draft, you buy a player for $10 because you think he's a $10 player, and somebody else buys a player for $10 because he thinks it's a $10 player, and not that they're a $6 player. So it's a little bit hard right after a draft to trade, because you're higher on somebody. That's why you bought him. So it's not exactly. But as you go on a month or two in the season, then things get a little bit more spread apart as the season has unfolded.
Yeah, I will make some April trades. You're right that it's different depending on whether it was a draft or an auction. If it's a draft, I will come out of that draft and look at the draft picks and think, I might think man, I was picking third, but if I was picking 13th, I would have been all over the values that this person here got in rounds, right? In rounds, on the round 3-4 turn. So right. I might make a play for one of those guys because they might like one of my early picks. I picked third, so I got a stud. I got someone who everybody loves. Well, maybe, man, I picked 13. They got my number 6 guy, and I got kind of everybody's number 3 guy. maybe this person will give me their first rounder and someone else I like they took in the middle rounds for my guy took third overall. There's always ways there because like let's be honest, if we just drafted at different spots, we'd have different rosters. And then with an auction or a salary cap draft, like you said, like you'll grab the guy who you think is worth 10, and I'll grab the guy who I think is worth 10, but it's not quite that cut and dry where sometimes certain players will go at certain points in the auction and I'll think, oh, I can't believe they got, I can't believe they just got Tyler O'Neill for $3. Like I would have paid 7 for him, but my outfield's full, or I would have paid 7 for him, but I just don't have it anymore. So I'll bookmark on my sheet, some of the deals that I thought were the best. And if someone else got 2 or 3 of the deals that I thought were the best, then I might go to them afterwards and say, I really like the deals you got on a couple guys. Like, did you like the prices I paid for a couple guys? Maybe there's a way we can do a 2-for-1 or something like that. So you're right. April trading is a little trickier in that regard, but there are still ways to get a deal done. Although some people just won't deal in April. There are people who just want to draft their team and sit on it till May, and I get that. It's their team; they can do what they want with it.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys actually. I don't like doing these early trades because a lot of these early trades, the rest of the league looks at it. They're like, wait a second, this isn't fair, and you get so many vetoes very early on in the season because everyone has such different values for different players. You think you're getting a great deal, someone else is getting a great deal, and everyone else in the league thinks that one team is fleecing the other one. So it's so hard to do it later. And you know what? When it comes down to trading, my personal opinion is we only go to trade for a need. I really don't try to stockpile anything when it comes to trades early in the season. I really look for if I have a glaring need, if a player goes down real early, that's something I'll go after. But otherwise, I tend to rely more on my drafting skills and try to, enhance my team with trades occasionally, but not that often.
Yeah. The other thing I'll also add is that in the middle of the year, you might come up with a roster surplus on your team, and so if you have 3 shortstops on your bench, all who you probably should not be dropping, that's another area where, all right, I've got an extra shortstop. Maybe I'm a little bit thin pitching, and you can swap like for like value and just get rid of the roster surplus. Question to you though, Fred, is how do you know when you should look for a trade versus just playing the waiver wire? I mean, certainly if, let's say, big guy Tyler Glass now gets hurt, I mean, sure, I'd love to have another pitcher, but it's going to cost me if I trade for him. Should I just go to the waiver wire? How do you know when to say, well, in order to fill the need, I need to do it the trade route? Of course, waiver wire, you don't have to give up any assets other than your fab capital.
Yeah, no, well, and sometimes the two things complement each other where, like you said, you may have an injury and you may think, I think I'm going to go to the waiver wire. And then you look at the waiver wire and you're like, I think I'm going to go to the trades. I've looked at the waiver wire and I have now changed my mind. I am not impressed with what's available. I go to the trade markets in a different way sometimes. Just as I'm following baseball and fantasy baseball, sometimes ideas pop into my head and I see maybe like an angle on something. So, a really obvious one would be like Luis Castillo struggled mightily for the first couple months of the season, and there were numerous buy low opportunities out there. If I was a guy who believed in Luis Castillo, which I didn't trade for him in any leagues, but that's an obvious one that pops in my head. Like I could be following Luis Castillo. I could hear him discussed on some podcasts, and I could be like, "Wow, the market is really down on this guy." I don't think I'm quite as down on him as the market is. You know what? I think I'll approach the Luis Castillo owner in a couple of my leagues and just see how down they are. Like I'll throw them out something that's a buy low, but reasonable buy low, and just see what they say. Or again, I have Castillo and NL tout, and I didn't sell low on him, but there might have been a point where I'm just like, you know what, I'm done with this guy. I'm gonna find a 50 cents on the dollar deal and I'm out. So a lot of my trade negotiations, sometimes they're spurred by, like you said, like I had an injury to a closer or something like that, or I'm lagging behind in home runs and I need to find a home run hitter. But they're often more individual player based where I'll see a player out there and I'm just like, okay, I think I've become higher on this person. Maybe I'm doing research, writing an article, and I'm like, okay, this guy, I like what I see here. I think I'm higher than the market on this guy. I'm going to go and put a fair offer in on him, or I'm lower than this guy. I'm going to try to get him off my team, before other people maybe feel the same way about him I do. So sometimes mine are individual player based, at least in the first half of the season. Now they're more category based, where I'm looking for certain types of players.
Ruven?
Yeah, I totally agree. In the very beginning, you should be looking for certain players that, you know what, that's the player that I want. Every week we scour the waiver wire and we're saying, okay, we can get this category on the waiver wire, we can get this category on the waiver, and there's a certain trend in the waiver wire where you can get, like, people usually go after saves on the waiver wire or stolen bases, that type of thing. But it's very hard to find power on the waiver wire. It's very hard to find those big high strikeout pictures on the waiver wire unless you're going to go for the trade. And those are the guys you have to target. And sometimes you need to package a couple of guys together to get that one big name.
Yeah, I tend to go for on the waiver wire. You can find the 250, 25 homer guys. Depending upon the depth of your league. You can find 450 ERA, 135 WHIP, 9K per nine. You can find that in streaming. I would not trade for somebody like that because those are not unique profiles. Or even if, sure, you can't find a 30 homer guy in the waiver wire, but you can find a 25 homer guy. Certainly not worth giving up an asset to gain 5 more homers. It's the uniqueness. To me, it's the uniqueness of the player profile. You're not going to make up somebody who steals 30 stolen bases. You're not going to make up closers that are really good. You're not going to make up 2020 players. Uniqueness of profile is very important, and that's what I look for trading. If I either need someone or if I think that somebody is undervalued with unique profile, that's when I'd want to trade. So the question to you, Fred, is how do you identify what to trade for to help your roster, and how do you identify what you can trade with from your roster to get it?
Right. So during the value phase, I like what to trade for is just players who I feel I feel are maybe undervalued by the market right now. During the stand, like now that we're into the second half, during that like standings phase, it's a little more, I think maybe it's a little more clear cut where, I'm looking at the standings. I'm not looking at the categories that I'm bad in. I think that's always misleading advice. Like when people say like, well, find your weakest categories and address those weaknesses. Well, that's like okay in April, but by now, like you might be hopeless in some of those categories. You might be second last, staring way up at third last. So I'm looking for the tightly bunched categories and the ones where I can make a move in those. And I also one thing that you have to look at this point in the year is, so you want to move up in certain categories. Well, like your roster's probably changed throughout the season so far. So is your current roster already poised to move up in that category, or is it still the same old, same old? So for example, maybe you're in a tightly bunched home run race. So you think, oh, I got to go and get a home run hitter. Well, maybe you've already added some home run hitters off waivers the last like 3 weeks. They just haven't totally taken effect yet. So it's not just looking at the categories, but it's also looking at the categories and what you honestly think the potential is for your roster. I have a league where I'm tightly bunched in steals, but I have Modesty on my IR. Well, normally I would want to go out and make a trade for a base stealer, but I don't because I'm going to roll the dice on Modesty coming back. I think that's a fair gamble to take to try to win that league, or at least to push ahead in the steals category. So you got to kind of compare your roster with the categories at this point.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And actually, I was going to make the same exact point that it's not what you're bad in, it's what the tightly bunched. The word for that is it's categories with a high gradient. And it's when it's tightly bunched, and it's not just where you can gain, but it also could be where you can lose. If you have 75 homers and the next couple are in your category of 70, 74, 73, 72, 71, you could stand to lose 4 points really easily. So I would trade for homers there so that you don't lose any points. And of course, conversely, the other way around, if you got 71 homers and the next couple ahead of you are 72, 73, 74, well, that's a fantastic place to trade with. It's the high gradient, not the what do I need.
There's actually one other aspect that you're not thinking about. Let's say you're in third place. You look at the teams ahead of you. Where are they in the categories that you're behind them in? How close are you? Because if you can catch up in that one category, it's a 2-point swing either way. You can knock them down one and you go up one. So you have to look those categories also.
Yeah. how do you engage teams for trades? Do you either reach out individually with people and give them initial offers? And do you lowball offers initially because you can always negotiate, or do you give people something really close to the final offer? Do you do like a trade block thing where you just shout out to the league, guys, I'm trading this guy, or guys, I need a shortstop, and get offers? How do you engage the team that you do?
Yeah, I try to never do the trade block thing. I find I've never had any great experiences with that. Like I find I don't get much back from it. I think it's maybe too vague sometimes for people to work with. Although that being said, I guess I have seen some people. Scott Pianowski does a good job sometimes of. I'll see him throw out a trade block, like a league-wide email, and then like 12 hours later, I'll see him make a trade. So it does happen. I've never had great experiences with it. So I will usually make my initial offers like they'll be like if they're not my best offer, they'll be pretty close. And often I think they are like pretty much my best offer, but in there we're gonna try to we can massage the players a bit because sometimes maybe I'll offer a trade and then someone will write me back and be like, oh, like I don't like the guy you're sending. Like he's not one of my guys. I don't like that guy. And I'm like, okay, sure. Well, we'll just go in another direction here. Maybe we can still make it work. So I try not to send really bad offers. Once in a while someone will construe it that way because they just don't like someone that I have, especially maybe some of the more polarizing players. Like a Luis Castillo a couple months ago. Like, what was that guy worth? Well, to some people, he was still worth a lot. To some people, some people were dropping him in shallow leagues. So, yeah, I try to make a pretty good offer at the beginning. I try to make an offer. If I'm sending an email instead of making an offer, which I may do especially if it's someone I know pretty well, there'll probably be an offer or at least the bones of an offer in that email. Hey, I'm looking to get a shortstop. You've got this guy and this guy. I've got starting pitching to deal. Can you name me? Here are my names of my starters. Can you tell me a couple starters on my team you like? And then I will offer to do the work. So I'll say, you tell me a couple of my starters you like, and I will send you an offer for a shortstop, like one or two offers for a shortstop that I hope you'll like. I try to do the legwork for them and make the process if I want to do the trade, so I'm going to do the work and make things easier for them.
Right. Do you find that if you're giving final offers or something close to it, I don't know, there's always negotiation. Do you find it works better, or is that more of a long-term play? Because hey, if you're going to trade with Fred Zinkie, that's his best offer. He's not going to change it. Does that help you in the long run, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll change a lot. So, and one thing that I try to do is I try to give the other owner as much control over the process as possible. So, I'll say to them I'll ask them can you name a couple infielders on my team you like, or name a couple starters on my team you like, or I might say I need to get this pitcher. I want to get Brandon Woodruff from you. I need a pitcher. You've got Brandon Woodruff and Carlos Rodon and Clayton Kershaw. Let's say Kershaw is healthy right now. I'd really like to get one of them. You tell me which one you want to give me, and then I'll make an offer for him. You tell me I try to give the other person as much control over the trade negotiations as possible. I find that works well for people because it sounds kind of pie in the sky to say we're looking to make both people happy, but we are, especially if you're going to play in these leagues for a long time, and especially because we all value the players differently. I would order those three. If Kershaw was healthy, I'd probably go Woodruff, Kershaw, Rodon. But if we went around the room, you guys might order them differently. So if I was approaching you for a trade, I might say, you got all three. Which one do you want? Which one do you want to deal? And then we'll start from there. Again, that gives you more control over the process and makes it more likely we'll find something that you like.
Uwe?
Yeah, I agree, because if you send out an offer that's just totally off the wall, or in quote unquote insulting the intelligence of the other team or the player, they're not going to want to. Number one, they're not going to want to trade with you. Number two, they're not going to think you're serious. And number three, sometimes they'll send an email blast to the rest of the league making fun of that trade offer, and then that screws you up for the entire league. So you have to be very careful what kind of offers you send out, because if you send out the wrong type of offer, you may be not being able to make a trade in that league forever. And that in home leagues that happens all the time. People say this person you can't trade with him because he's going to screw you over because he's only looking for the best for him. He's not really thinking about both sides. But if you give a serious offer the first time, or a semi-serious offer that sort of makes sense for both teams, and you're able to rationale it out, saying that you need this, I need this, let's get this to work, and these two players or these three players fit the profile, then they'll be more serious, and the rest of the league will take you seriously also if that's what you do.
Yeah. Do you think there's such a thing as a bad offer that you send something and that's so insulting to somebody?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are sometimes. I try to always send. So with any offer, I try to send one short paragraph explaining my rationale behind it. When I say short paragraph, I'm going to say 3 sentences on average, maybe 4, maybe 2, but I'd say about 3 sentences, just saying like, hey, I'm looking for help in the steals category, preferably an infielder. I have extra starting pitching to deal. I noticed that you're behind a large group of teams in strikeouts, so I thought that maybe that, and you're third in steals, so I think that we're a good match. So now I've laid out kind of why I think this should be interesting to them, and then I might say something like like out of a player A, B, and C, I'd like to get one of those players from you, and I thought you might like one of players X, Y, Z from me. So if this offer doesn't work for you, let me know who you do like from my pitching group. So I'm giving them an offer. I'm telling them why I think it makes sense from a categories perspective for both teams. And then I'm going to tell them why it makes sense, I think, from a talent perspective for both teams. But I'm also going to throw out that caveat of like, if you don't agree with me, like if I'm offering you, Corbin Burns, and you're like, I don't want Corbin Burns. He's already used up too many innings this year. Like, I'm not going to get enough innings out of him the rest of the way. Then I'm like, okay, cool, no problem. Like, Corbin Burns isn't the guy. Like, let's just figure out one of my other guys. So I try to explain it, but like, I don't want to write a novel for that other owner, because I don't think they want to hear that. And sometimes I'll back it up with a little stat. So for example, I made a trade the other day, and I just said to the person, like, not that the ESPN player rater is the be all and end all, but the 2 players we were trading were within 5 spots overall on the ESPN player rater. So, and I'm sure I could have gone to the Yahoo player rater and they would have been same type of thing. So I'm kind of saying like, hey, like some of these rating systems kind of have these guys really close to each other. Just kind of showing that if you think I'm out to lunch on it, like I'm probably not.
Right. Is there ever a situation where you would tell another player, another team, what your offer was and re-up someone? So, do you exclusively work with one team, or you say, all right, listen, I'm trying to unload this person, okay, what do you got? And then somebody tells you an offer, I'll give you this player, and you say, all right, but you know what, the other guy offered me that guy, you got to do better. Does that ever happen to you?
So I will never tell someone about negotiations with another team at all. So the most I would tell them was like, I've been also talking with Tom about trading him this player. That's all I'll tell him. So I will never tell, I feel like that's a breach of confidentiality. I will never tell the other owner, like, oh, Tom and I talked about this player and he was offering me this. Like, I never do that. I'll be honest. So I might say to someone like, hey, I'll move Corbin Burns, but just so you know, I am talking to another team or 2 other teams or whatever about moving a starting pitcher, and I'm only going to move one. So just so you know, and I'm not putting under any pressure, but like once I make a starting pitcher trade, whether it's Burns or one of my other aces, then I'm done trading a starting pitcher, I think. So I don't want to hold a gun to their head, but I'm just giving them like a little bit of perspective. But I would have, if possible, avoid saying who I was even talking to. And then if that even came out, like I would never ever say the contents of those negotiations. I just feel like I feel like trade talks. I would also, like Reuven was saying, like I personally would never, like if you offered me the worst trade in the world, I would not push it out to other people. Like I might tell one friend in the fantasy circles, and I probably wouldn't even use your name. I'd be like, "Oh my God, you're not gonna believe this! I just got offered this for this. Like, why are people so crazy?" But I wouldn't
Yeah.
say anything to anyone else in my league. I wouldn't be like, "LOL, everybody, just so you know, he offered me this for this. Like, he's so insulting." I honestly, I just write the person back and be like, "Hey, I don't think that offer's close for me," and then I just drop it.
Right, right, right. Ruben?
Yeah, I agree. You can bounce it off someone else. Say, you know what, I have an offer for this guy. Another team gave me another offer, and it's slightly better than yours. If you say that,
Yeah,
that means
that's
push the
okay.
team you're negotiating with that you're be able to get that last little bit or that one more player that you want. Just say you don't have to say names. You don't have to say what players. Say I have an offer for this player that I'm speaking to you about. It's just slightly better. Could you do a little bit better? If not, I may end up going with the other guy. It's I mean it's your player to be and to be all and end all. You get to say wherever he goes. But if you're able to get a little bit more out of the team you're trading with, by all means, don't go crazy about it. But just be smart about it.
I think there's nothing wrong with saying that. Listen, I got another better offer from somebody else, and short window here. I'm willing to work with you, but you've got to do better. I think there's nothing wrong with putting pressure. I mean, I do that in business. You put pressure on markets to get the best offer without telling them the other terms. You don't tell the exact terms. You just say, "I've got a better number. You need to beat this."
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but like I've always like I never lie. So I've never in the 10, 15 years I've been playing in expert leagues, like I've never said to someone like I have another offer when I don't. Like I never do that to someone. I never say like, well, I'm also talking to someone else about Corbin Burns, and I'm really not. I'm just trying to get them to push ahead and to make a better offer or something. I never lie because I just feel like that's bad karma, and it'll catch up with you at some point. At some point, you'll get tripped up in it or something. So, um, in fact, sometimes I'll even say to the person, "I've got nothing else on the go." So, like, if you want to talk trade about this guy, I'm in. But if you don't, that's okay. But like, I got nothing else with anyone else on the go right now, and I and
Right.
take the pressure right off.
Right. Want to talk a little bit about risk in trading. Something that nobody really talks about, or if they do, I'm sure there's not that many people talking about risk. But do you think that where your position is in the standings matter? And I say this because if I have a lead, if I'm in first place, I think that the types of trades that I'm looking for are very different than the types of trades if I'm in eighth place. And even if I have the same roster, even if I have, some guy gets injured, I need to replace a certain amount of stats, it really matters where I am in the standing as to who I want to get and why I want to do it. Do you incorporate any of that kind of philosophy into when you're trading?
Yeah, I think that's totally true. If you're in the lead right now, diversifying could be depends how
Right.
deep your roster is, but diversifying could be a good plan, right? But and just picking up players who are super stable in their roles. Maybe you're in the lead right now and you've got a bit of a hot shot young guy with some name value to him, like an Alec Manoa or someone like that. Maybe you picked up Duran or something like that. Maybe just trading him for those guys for less risky players, veterans with secure jobs and secure track records. I mean, it still may not work. You can trade for the most reliable veteran and he can get hurt tomorrow. I
Of
mean, it can
course.
happen,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I think so. I think that's not a bad plan. And like you said, like if you're in eighth place, um, trying to trade for players who are kind of risky, I think there's nothing wrong with making that move. Yeah, I think that's totally. I also think sometimes when you're making trades too, with risk, you can get caught up in the trade talks, and swept up, and sometimes we get swept up in what we're getting and not what we're giving up, and you really sometimes need to step back and think like, okay, am I being realistic in my expectations for these players that I'm getting? And sometimes you are, but you just need to step back and be like, okay, so I think of Alec Manoa because I live near Toronto, and Manoa could be awesome down the stretch or he could be terrible. But sometimes maybe I'm talking trade for him and I'm like, okay, I need to step back here. Like, am I actually painting a picture here where I get like the 95th percentile version of Alec Manoa? And am I really willing to pay for that in a trade right now? Or am I just swept up in the negotiations on a player who's admittedly pretty risky for the rest of the season?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, when I'm looking at my roster, come this time of year in late July, when right before a trade deadline, I'm looking at my roster and I'm saying, listen, of course, value is important, but as you said before, we're shifting to more categorical approach. The raw, straight up value is a little bit less of an issue. I'm looking at risk. If I'm in first place, I want to, de-risk. So take a guy like Mark Canna, okay? He's not super sexy. He's not great in any category, but he's good in everyone. I know he's going to get value down the stretch. I know he's going to give you a little steals, a little bit of homers. He'll be decent in runs. Batting average won't kill you. He's the kind of player you want, and I'm even willing to give somebody a little bit more valuable piece if they're very risky. Take a guy like Aristides Aquino, okay? Very low value, but he's got to me a lot of volatility. I can see Aquino as 20 homers down the stretch, or he can be a bench player and hardly bat. If you're in seventh place, that's the kind of guy that you need. It's the old finance trick. If you're near a bankrupt position, you should switch your stock portfolio to very risky investments because, hey, if they all go bunk, who cares? You're almost bankrupt anyways. But if they all go boom, well, that could put you from a deficit position into the black. So, if you're playing and the top three pay out and the bottom nine don't, you got to play like that. Just go for broke and just get really risky players on your roster and hope they strike it.
You also mentioned about the standings and position. It also matters what team you're trading with and their standings in the position in this their position in the position in the standings also. Because let's say you're in third place and you're trading with the team that's second to last place. What are their needs? Their needs are extreme. They need a lot. And to make a trade seem fair to the rest of the league, you may actually have to give up a little bit more to get what you want, only because you're trading with a team that's lower down in the standings. Otherwise, that trade is going to look very fishy.
Well, that's
to
a
other,
whole different story
teams in the league.
as to fairness and stuff.
Then you have the idea of not having, let's say, the bottom three or bottom four teams in the standings be able to trade after a certain point.
Yeah, I mean that's a different discussion in terms of fairness of trades and stuff. Let's talk about that now. Fred, you recently made a trade in NL Tout Wars, I believe. I think you're in first place, and you traded Ozzy Albies for Walker Buehler to a team that was pretty low down in the standings. Now, Tout Wars has a special rule that if you finish with fewer than a certain number of points in the league, then the next year you're penalized with FAB. So there's some incentive for a bottom team. Question is it enough to trade to lower value? Of course, what about teams leagues that do not have that rule? Should high up teams be trading with teams that are in very, very low with a very low probability of winning the whole thing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think I've always felt like that there are really no rules for that. You can trade for anyone. You're sure you can trade with anyone at any point in the season if they want to make the trade. I I hope all the different managers have integrity, and even if your team's lower in the standings, I hope you're trading with the purpose of saving some pride and moving up in the standings and improving yourself. But if the team in second is a perfect match in a certain way, there's only in some leagues 9, in some leagues 11, in some leagues maybe 13 or 14 other managers. So it's not like the major leagues where you've got about 29 other people to deal with. So I mean, you find the team that's a good fit with you, and if they happen to be way lower in the standings or way higher in the standings, then so be it. I've had teams, my labor team this year has struggled and is kind of middle of the pack right now, but was like way low. And I was trying to make trades, and I was way low, and I'd had a ton of injuries. Like I couldn't believe how many injuries I had, and I was trying to trade my way out of it. And I hope that everybody, even if I tried to trade my way out of it right up until the deadline in that league, like I hope everybody would give me a fair shake and not say like, oh, you're way down in the standings, I don't want to trade with you. Like I'm trying to trade my way up. I'm trying to save some face. Like I was thinking, I don't want to finish in a 15 team league. I don't want to finish 12th. Like I don't like that. I want to try to move up, even if it's to 6th or something like that. And I know there's no money there's no money in labor for any of it, but I know there's no pride in finishing 6th. But to me, it would mean something to not finish 12th. So I'll trade with anyone. The trade I recently made was initiated in the NL Tout, was initiated by Peter Kreutzer, who was the person I traded with. He offered me a a pitcher for hitter trade, and then we kind of tweaked it and made a deal. But yeah, he initiated it. He's trying to move up in the standings. I totally respect that, because if I was in Peter's position, I'd be trying to do the exact same thing. And for what Peter wanted to do, my roster, when you looked at the standings, was the absolute perfect fit for that deal.
Yeah, I have a different philosophy though. First of all, I think that leagues should make penalties for finishing last. I think that if leagues are going to pay out, I think there should be a pay scale all the way up and down. I think there should
Right.
be a difference between 10th place and 9th place and 8th place, even if it's small, because there has to be an aim. Because if there is no money given out, I actually don't think there should be trades. And let me give you my reasoning for that. Talk about stuff as I do as an actuary. So I work with something. I hope people are interested in this, but I work in something that's called reinsurance. Reinsurance is insurance for insurance companies. Now, if you have a company in America and you also own a company in Bermuda, back in the old days when the taxation rate was 35% in the U.S. but only 20% in Bermuda, you certainly want, if you're going to make profit, you want to make the profit in Bermuda and not in the U.S. Okay, so if you're gonna, you can make a sort of a contract of insurance and just have all the profits funnel from America to Bermuda. That is somewhat distasteful. It's actually illegal to do that. You can't, because it's business that's written in the U.S. You don't want it to go to Bermuda. Certainly the tax guys don't want that, and it's against the law. So anytime we have a contract, there has to be fairness, and there are very specific tests that have to be performed, and that's one of my jobs at my company, is to test that there's a reasonable chance that either side can lose. If there's high insurance losses, if there's low insurance losses, the Bermuda can lose, the U.S. entity can lose. There has to be some kind of way. In fantasy baseball, I think it's the same thing, but it's not reasonable. It's gain. Anytime there's a trade, there has to be a reasonable chance of a meaningful gain on both sides. Certainly, if you're in second place, your meaningful gain could push you into first. But if you're in last place and it's already almost the end of the year and you're 50 points out of the money, there is very, very little probability of you jumping up to the money. And so to me, there is no chance of a gain because you're not going to get in the money. So I think that is unbelievably unfair. And the team in last place, you should have traded earlier in the year. Well, what are you waiting till the last minute to balance your roster? It's unfair. And I take a very strong approach on that point because I'm just looking for fairness. You're basically taking a player not in the money-making pool and throwing him to their. I mean, the second place team is getting a player and really giving nothing to a pool that's going to have money. It doesn't make sense to me. That's why I think that leagues need to have some kind of pay scale up and down so that there's a reason, a gain for something up and down the entire standing pool.
Or turn the league into a keeper league, and then it gives everyone a reason to have these profitable trades so that they'll have it for next year and the year after.
Yeah,
That's possible. No, although not everybody likes keeper leagues. I'm not a big keeper league guy. I don't know. It just hasn't really caught my fancy. So I understand what you're saying about. I understand what you're saying. That being said, I will say first of all the players are still in the competition for impacting who wins the league, because even the team that's in last place isn't necessarily in last place in all the categories, and the team that's in last place could certainly, you know what I mean? Like the team in last place could be fourth in steals, and they could pass two guys in steals, and those two guys could be two guys who are competing for first, and they can impact the standings. So even the players on the last place teams, they're still impacting the overall standings because they're still in the league, even though that team can't compete to win. I understand from a like a business financial sense what you're saying. That being said, like I've always said, like once my name is on that team, I care about where they finish. Like there is a pride aspect to playing in these fantasy leagues. Like I have never finished last or second last or third last on any of these expert leagues, and I don't plan on doing that ever. So if I'm like in Tau Wars and I'm in 11th place out of 12, and until we hit the trade deadline, I'm going to keep battling because it says Fred Zinkie beside that team, and I do not want ever for there to be a team down that low. And if there ever is going to be a team down that low with my name on it, I want to know that I did everything I could to make sure that didn't happen, because it means something to me. And there is a pride aspect to these leagues. Like I said, in the Labor League, it will mean something to me if I could finish like fifth with all the injuries I had on that team at the beginning of the year. If I can pull it up to like fifth or sixth and not be 12th out of 15, to me that means a lot. Yeah, I'm not gonna like, it's not gonna, it doesn't mean as a lot as maybe a lot as finishing first will to the guy who finishes first, but it means something to me. I would say that if you don't want people trading past a certain date in your league, then move your trade deadline up. So, like, I think the Tout Wars won, and I love Tout Wars, but the trade deadline's at the end of August, and I think that's probably too late. I think the trade deadline should probably be at the end of July, especially if you're worried about, if you want to avoid those trades, just move your trade deadline up, because leagues are still super competitive after the trade deadline.
Sure,
but
sure.
I would say you could move the trade deadline up. But there's so many factors from those bottom feeder teams. Like, we're talking trades tonight, but there's whether they even submit their lineups. There's whether they still compete on the waiver wire. Like, how many times have we seen teams that finish we have $1,000 fab and they finish the season with $750 fab because they quit.
Right.
They quit halfway through, and you're like, man, if that guy had kept competing, he could have wrestled some players away from the guy who beat me out to win the league. Like, he had the fab to do it, and he just didn't even bother using it anymore. And the pickups were obvious, and he just isn't even doing it anymore. So I think just everyone competing to the end is really what we're striving for.
Yeah. Listen, there's a lot of gray areas here, good to hear both sides of the coin. Again, the way to do it is to just change the rules a little bit. We had a rule in one of Ruben and I's home league that there was a trade deadline, but then there was an earlier trade deadline, so that the top third of the league would not be allowed to trade with the bottom third of the league. The top third can trade with the middle third can trade with the bottom third, and the middle can trade with anybody. But you can't have the top teams trading with the bottom teams past, let's say, the All-Star break, and the rest of the league, it was first week in August. Just to block out some of these type of seemingly collusive trades, or to keep people more engaged earlier. And hey, you want to trade, you got to trade earlier and get this done.
I mean, but for sure. And I mean, sometimes a team in 10th place, they might have traded earlier. They might have traded earlier, middler, and later. Like, they might have been doing all sorts of things, and just nothing's working. But I can respect someone who's trying things, and sometimes not trading is still trying. But sometimes people who are low in the standings, it's not like they didn't bother trading until July. They did trade maybe in April and May and June. It hasn't worked.
You and I both had articles about earlier Fernando Tatis and the possibility of trading him after that injury. But before we talk about that, it's time for the Injury Guru's Trivia of the Week.
So as we're going to jump into our discussion about Fernando Tatis Jr., he is currently the number one overall ranked fantasy player in most standard scoring leagues, and he was drafted in most leagues as either the first, second, usually sometimes third, but usually the first or second in most drafts this year. So the trivia for this week is, in the last 10 years, 2 players have either been drafted first or second and ended up the fantasy year being value-wise first or second. Who are they?
It's amazing how that's not a lot, right? Only 2.
2 in the last 10 years have been drafted first or second and finished the year first or second.
Correct.
In the last 10 years.
10 years.
Okay.
That's a good one this week, Ruben.
It's interesting. I mean, one of them, just you have to go back and think who were the top picks in the last couple of years. First 2 picks.
Yeah, totally. I'm thinking back, I feel like Trout never actually is. I feel like I would say Trout's one of them, but I feel like he never is really first or second.
Trout was one of them in 2014 and in 2016.
I just felt like in those 10 years, if we were occupying that's 20 guys who have gone first or second. I felt like he was probably like 6 of them out of the 20, maybe 7 out of the 20. So I felt like
good to guess him just for quantity, right?
Yeah, the best odds. Now the other one. So now I'm trying to think of other people who have been going first or second.
I'll give you a hint. He's still in the league.
Okay.
He's older. Miguel Cabrera?
Miguel Cabrera is correct.
Ah,
Wow.
2012, 2013, he
you,
was almost a consensus number one.
you
And
said still in the
and then
league. That means he's old.
well, I'm sorry. In 2013, he was drafted number one usually, and he was I think the second overall. And in 2012, he was drafted either first or second, but he ranked third, so he
Maybe
almost got back
Pujols.
the same value.
Maybe
How about
Pujols if you
that?
go if you go back long enough, right?
Yeah. What
Yeah,
year
well,
did you
yeah,
say was the Trout? What was the Trout year?
2014 and 2016,
Oh wow. So okay, so
twice.
nobody's done it in the last since 2016.
Nobody's
Right.
no.
Yeah.
The problem is
Right.
everyone in those top picks have gotten injured, which brings us to Fernando Tatis. He was injured earlier this year, and I know I was advocating and Ari was advocating just a little bit also to maybe trade him because you don't know what you're going to get from the rest of the season. So then the question here is this: were we wrong to say that at this point? I mean, this is a question of trading. Would you trade your top pick over from the entire draft during the course of the season just because you think he's not going to get that value?
Yeah, it's such a tough call. So I have him on my Tout NL team, and he's obviously the biggest part of the puzzle right now. So I was writing articles encouraging people to trade him, but I didn't actually trade him. That just doesn't make me like a hypocrite or anything because I would have traded him. If somebody had given me a good offer for him, I would have traded him. Nobody gave me an offer for him in that league. I thought about offering him out. I remember one of the offers I was considering was Pete Alonso, and I just couldn't get myself to send it. Like I remember thinking about it, and I was like, I want a little more. I think he was a $27 player in the NL, and Tatis was 38, and I was like, I can't quite. And then I thought about offering him for Machado, and I thought, the other guy will never take that. Like at the time when he was injured, I was like, the other guy will never take that. And I didn't quite find my sweet spot, and nobody offered me a deal. And man, am I ever glad that nobody offered me a deal. I don't think the advice we were giving was bad. This is just a unique situation where a guy has been
Yeah.
like so incredibly talented that he's recovered from an injury quickly. Everyone thought they were crazy when he came back. He comes right back, and he's like you said, he's the number one player. Like I don't ever remember seeing something like this before.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the process was sound and the process was right. And I wouldn't take back the process, but going back thinking some of the numbers I put together. So I put together a probabilistic model and said, okay, well, there's like a 5% chance he's going to come back in a month and 10% chance he's going to come back the next 3 weeks. And there's a 35% chance he's out for the whole year. And I think that the problem with that model was not the model, it was the parameters. 35% chance for him out for the year. That was probably a little drastic. Maybe it should only have been 20%. Not going to come back for a month, only 10% chance. Maybe it should have been a little bit more, being that the Padres said, no, he's not going to miss much time. So I think that if I rejigger some of the math, I probably would have said, okay, I would trade him for Bo Bichette. Instead of saying trade him for Javi Baez. I think the process was right. And look, there's a lot of risk in that top pick. And when a guy looks that bad, and you know how many errors he was committing? He was committing so many errors. He did not look the least bit right, and I'm still astonished that he came back. I think everybody is.
So many people thought he wasn't going to come back. So many people though are married to that first or second pick. They're saying, you know what, I'm not going to trade him because he's either going to make my team or he's going to break my team.
That's
well,
wrong.
A lot of people think that, and then you go to the second round, and everyone with second Luis Castillo started not pitching well. People saying, you know what,
That's
there are probably more.
different.
It's a difference of a round. That's the difference.
No. But Castillo was bad performance, and I guess you can throw in some injury. Hey, why is he performing bad? Maybe his injury. I mean, this was just a question of you don't know is he coming back? When's he coming back? That's just a health risk right off the bat, and a big one at that.
Well, then what about trading Adalberto Mondesi earlier this year? Would win that same idea then, isn't it? I mean, he's a second-round player. Would you have been more willing to trade Mondesi that much earlier?
No, I mean, with Mondesi, I advocated not going anywhere near him with a 20-foot pole
that's different.
because of the risk.
But if you had him, would you have traded him because of his injury? because you think he's not going to come back? Because how much value did someone get out of Mondesi yet? It's the same. It's almost. It's similar, but it's not the same.
But with Tatis, though, the trade market was there. If you said, "Hey, I'll take Javi Baez for Tatis," that trade market was ripe. Like anybody who had Baez, or not anybody, but enough people who had Baez or somebody in that caliber would have said, "Okay, I'll take a gamble on Tatis." So you were able to get that. Mondesi, I mean, what are you? If you drafted him, what are you going to get back from Mondesi? I don't know if there was a good trade available at that point.
When I was writing the Tatis article, my thought was it all depended on what replacement level was in your league. So, for example, Tatis for Javi Baez to me was I can't stand Javi Baez, but if I could stand him,
The value level. Yeah.
from a value level, that made sense. For example, in an NL only, because the replacement level in NL only is a complete zero.
Correct.
It might in a 15-team league. I said something like Tim Anderson, who was a couple rounds ahead of Javi Baez in drafts, and then in like a 10-team league, it was like Bo Bichette, like where I'm dropping around because the replacement level's so high. And my thought wasn't that there was a chance you could get a zero from Tatis the rest of the way, but there was also a chance you'd get some, but have spurts of injury and things like that. But I think the Mondesi point is interesting in the sense of he was a second round pick more instead of a first round pick. But if you were like right now, his value has really cratered. But back when he had his first IL stint, there was still hope out there that he could come back and steal 35 bases this season. Like it just hasn't worked out. So back in April, if you had wanted to, you probably could have traded him for Javi Baez or something like that, right? Like, because he wasn't supposed to be out that long. I mean, his was different than Tatis too. Tatis' injury was kind of scary. We were like, oh my gosh, this could rob this guy of his power. And there were people going on these huge tangents of like, this could be a career impacting injury and all these things. With Mondesi, you were just like, well, this is just a base stealer with a hamstring injury. Like it's disappointing, but in theory, and it hasn't happened. So basically what I think is the Mondesi injury is the perfect way to point out what we were worried about with Tatis, what could have happened, right? Like you talk about mitigating risk. The Mondesi injury is what we were worried about with Tatis. We were worried he'd come back, he'd re-injure his shoulder, he'd be out for a long time, you get almost nothing from him. That's what we were trying to urge people to avoid. We were trying to say, get something for this guy now if you can, and just avoid that Mondesi situation. Because the truth is, like, the difference between the Tatis situation and the Mondesi situation is, from a fantasy perspective, is almost just dumb luck. Like, if you had Tatis or if you had Mondesi, like, Mondesi hasn't come back. He can't seem to shake this injury. Tatis shook it in 10 days, and now he's fine. When they were both out in April, we didn't know. It could have been the other way around. Mondesi could have come back in May and started running bases, stealing bases like crazy, and Tatis could have had the shoulder injury nag all season, and we didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. All right, any other thoughts, guys, before we move on to our next section?
No, I think we nailed it. And for those people who did trade Tatis, I feel sorry for you. Unless you traded for a pitcher that's been doing well. If you can transform into something that you were lacking in the draft, then that's fine. But if you're looking just for a complete replacement, then you sort of failed.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our waiver wire section. That's where we talk about a few potential waiver wire pickups for this week. Fred, you're the guest. We'll start with you. Name a player or two that you think that people should be paying attention to and possibly pick up.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure totally what you guys were driving for league size. So I kind of prepped, some different thresholds.
Yeah.
Austin Gomber's one for leagues that are maybe, I'd say 12 teams. He dropped waivers when he was hurt in some of those leagues, so he's going to come back, or is back, and has 2 road starts next week. So I think Gomber's an interesting guy to pick up right now, because anytime you get those Rockies pitchers for road starts, the matchups aren't great next week. They're the Angels and the Padres, but Gomber was really pitching well, so I have some interest in him when he's outside of Coors. And then for deep leagues, and I don't usually say this guy's name out loud since he's been in the majors, but John Nagowski for deep leagues is someone who's kind of caught my eye from the Pirates. He's hitting .319. Looking at his minor league profile, there's not a lot of power there, but first base isn't deep, and there's teams out there that need batting average, and I think he can hit for average in the majors, and I just think there's a lot of playing time opportunity on the Pirates the rest of the way, because there'll probably be even more after the trade deadline, so I could see him playing regularly the rest of the season. I don't know exactly what Nagowski can be in the majors, but he never really got a chance prior to this year. And his minor league on base percentages are quite high. So, I mean, and his strikeout to walk rates are good. So, I think he could handle himself at the plate in the majors. So, I don't think Nagowski's going to win your league, but if you're looking to move up in the batting average category, I think he's an interesting guy. That really, I don't find people are really talking about him at all.
No, not at all. Good pick, Ruben.
I can't believe you took him because I was about to mention him too. That's kind of funny. I actually went to a Pirates Met game and he actually got a hit off of Diaz and he looks for real. He comes from the Cardinal mold just like
Yep.
Randy Rosarina did, and if he can get hot, a la Rosarina, not obviously in the playoffs because the Pirates aren't going anywhere,
Wow.
but he's going to get his playing time. He's only 8% owned in CBS. He's 22 for 66, so there is a significant amount of at bats there to get something for, and he's hitting. If you need someone for batting average, you need someone to fill in. Colin Moran, I don't know when he's coming back. He's still injured. He's been on and off injured the whole season. I think Nagowski will get a lot of playing time. They even made it try to put him in the outfield. I wouldn't be surprised about that also because they're kind of thin there. And as soon as they start trading people away, I think he'll get even more playing time. Another guy I want to mention, a guy we mentioned a lot on the show, is Peter Fairbanks. I mean, we mentioned him a ton. JP Fireisen went on the IL with shoulder issues, and Peter Fairbanks went through a rough spot where his ERA jumped up a little bit. But in the last 7 appearances, he's allowed 1 hit and no walks. He has 2 stolen bases also in the last week. He's only 16% owned in CBS, and he's definitely a guy, if you're looking for saves, that's a guy to grab, especially because you see now already that the Rays are boosting their lineup. They're going to have a better team. They just got Nelson Cruz, so they're going to get a lot more save opportunities, I think. And one other guy I wanted to mention, I really didn't think about it that much until I actually heard Aaron Boone talking about him, and that's Greg Allen. Greg Allen was brought up by the Yankees. He was always known for his speed when it was with Cleveland. He never got really a good chance. He's actually hitting pretty well already to start the season. He's batting .417. Yes, it's only 12 at bats, but he's getting playing time because of injuries. And you don't see Giancarlo Stanton play in the outfield. But that's what I heard today. Earlier today, Aaron Boone said that they're going to start putting Giancarlo Stanton into the outfield this weekend. If that's the case, Greg Allen may not get as much playing time. But still, you need a stolen base guy. This may be your Jared Dyson for the year.
I think that's incredible that you guys both came up with Nagowski, and
I can't believe that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw one dart, and I'll give you a couple of people that I think are under-owned. I'll do the dart last. Under-owned pitcher, Logan Webb, more for shallow leagues.
Yes.
Yeah, very under-owned. He's less than 40% owned on CBS. I don't know why. Now, he has got his 2 start this week, although it's against the Dodgers and Houston. And so actually, I'm telling you it's the time to pick him up because there'll be less people interested in him this week because of those tough matchups. But this guy has a 3.54 ERA, and that's justified by a 3.03 xFIP. He's for real. 60 strikeouts in 56 innings. I have a statistic that I do. It's called MPDI, Maddox Plate Discipline Index, and that basically gives the Greg Maddux philosophy of pitching. So Greg Maddux used to say, you know what, you know who the best pitchers are? It's you throw something outside and the batter swings, and when you throw it down the middle, they don't swing. Logan Webb is one of the best guys in all of baseball to do this. 16% of all pitches that he throws are thrown for strikes, not swung. Only 24% of his pitches are thrown in the zone and swung on. That is the 4th lowest in baseball. This is somebody who I like his stuff. I like his attack approach, and he's getting it done. He's so under-owned. Another under-owned guy, Jose Iglesias, less than 30%. I like these batting average guys. He's batting .281. He's getting tons of playing time, 316 plate appearances, 7 homers, 4 stolen bases. He's got 38 runs. That matters in fantasy. Batting average and runs, they're the categories that are very correlated with success in fantasy baseball. So I think he's under-owned, and he gets a lot of playing time. And Heimer Candelario, less than 50% owned. Another guy, he's got a robust .269 average, looks legit. He's only has 6 homers this year, but I think it should be more. His homer to fly ball ratio is a bit unlucky, 7.5. He's actually better in OBP leagues. He walks a lot, 11%, which he's doing this year, and that's what he's been doing all his career. He's what I call a low variance player. He's pretty stable. Again, it's if you're in first place, if you're in second place, you need a spot in a corner infielder. I think that's a really good pickup for stability. We do these waiver wires and we're just throwing out guys, but sometimes it really matters, again, what kind of roster you have. If you've got a risky roster, you want more of the Nagowskis, less of the Candelarios, and the reverse is true. And the dart I'll throw is Bradley Zimmer, 5% owned. In his last 10 games, batting .324 with 2 homers, 2 stolen bases. He's got that power speed blend, but here's what I look at. He's now batting leadoff. When you're batting leadoff, I don't care what you're doing, you're going to get some runs. He's hot right now. For deeper leagues, I would throw that dart at Bradley Zimmer. Anyone else you want to throw in, Fred?
I think you just made a. I just want to piggyback on your point you made
Please.
About Iglesias and some of these guys. Oh, I'll throw in Nico Horner.
Yeah.
No power, not much. I hit for power in the spring. I just think the Cubs lineup is getting gutted, and he should be hitting high in it down the stretch. He's hitting .321. He's only 16% rostered in Yahoo, which I find crazy. He's 3 positions eligible. Anyways, what I was going to say with your Jose Iglesias is, he's on what I call my Freddie Galvis All-Stars, and those are my players who have no upside, but they just play every day, and by the end of the season they have 15 or 20 homers, or maybe they're a 12 homer 10 steal guy or something, but kind of in homers and steals they're going to finish 15 to 20 combined, but there's no real upside with them, but there's also not much downside, and they just accumulate playing time. They don't hurt your batting average. Sometimes they even help it. I think in April you can steer away from those guys and chase the potential breakout guys, but we're probably already past, honestly, the time of year where you need to add those guys. It was probably about June where your early season breakouts are done, and I mean, obviously you can pick up the Durans and those guys who get called up and are exciting, but the guys like Iglesias can be really valuable, especially if your team's already doing well. And that doing well doesn't necessarily mean first. It can mean even third, and you just want more depth to steady the ship. Slow and steady can win the race, where you just grind your way up some categories with guys like Iglesias. And I don't know. I think like I said, I think we've hit the time in the year where it's time to stop chasing. Other than someone really interesting, but generally time to stop chasing these stats that are never going to come and just accept life and grab Jose Iglesias and just enjoy the steady production.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Again, it matters what time just as I said, it matters your standing, but also matters the time of the year. Early, you're looking for the upside. Here, you're looking for the playing time. So it just these advice columns and waiver wires. It's not just the player; it's the player and the situation. So that's a good point there. All right, quick pitcher preview. Is there any pitchers that are coming up in the next week that either has a good 2-start week or one good start that you like to pick up?
Yeah, so I mentioned Gomber, with my waiver wire pickups, but anytime I can get, well, actually I wouldn't say any, I would say basically none of the Coors Field pitchers, but if I get Gomber, I think that's a pretty good one. I've been chasing pretty hard people who are facing the Rockies on the road, or generally the Diamondbacks or the Pirates or the Marlins. So just, some guys who are facing some of those teams. Adrian Hauser will go to Pittsburgh. Eric Lauer should go to Pittsburgh. Those would be guys I would be interested in for that reason. Guys who I don't really like the guys who are facing the Diamondbacks last week, so I'll probably stay away from them. But I think those guys who are facing the Pirates, those Brewers who are facing the Pirates, I think that could be favorable matchups for those guys. And Hauser's available in some shallower leagues, and Lauer's available in a lot of them.
Yep. Moving.
Yeah, I was going to mention actually a possible Pirates pitcher. I'm a little nervous about him, but Tyler Anderson, he's 2-start, and he's actually pitching with some length. His last 3 starts, he's gone a total of 18 innings and gotten 14 strikeouts. He's playing the Brewers one game, and he's going to be playing, I believe it's supposed to be the Phillies and Matt Moore. So it's not that bad of a matchup, but whether or not you're going to get any wins out of him, that's questionable, which is why I'm a little nervous about getting him. But there is the 1-start guy that I'm looking at, and because he may be 2-start the following week, because this is the time of year when he should be looking at future 2-start pitchers, and that's Cal Quantrill. He's 1-start against St. Louis. He's eligible both as a reliever and a starting pitcher in CBS, and he's only owned in 11% of leagues. So he's a guy you may want to get, not just for this week, but maybe for next week when you have 2 starts. And he's got the upside. He can strike out people. He's done it before. If he can turn it around and turn it on and have a great week, he may help you do really well that week.
Yeah, I don't really see many pitchers this week. I think this week I'm actually going to focus more on some closer darts and second guys. Get the David. We talked about him a lot, but get the David Bednards right now on your team. That's got to be a priority. Brett Anderson, I'll throw another Brew in there. Goes to Pittsburgh. I love Brett Anderson. He's not going to get you the strikeouts, but he has a good shot at going deep into the game, and he doesn't walk many people. So I like those guys. Looking at Michael Wacha, got a good start against the Yankees, but then he faces Boston. It's tough, but he's been very good in those last 3 starts. 1-0 record, 3 ERA, 18 strikeouts in his last 15 innings. Sometimes players go on a streak, and Wacha is on such a streak right now. All right, we got a couple of mailbag questions here, some good ones this week. Maze Copeland asks, do you have any rules for trading with teams higher in the standings? If I'm running third, fourth, I have a hard time ever justifying a trade with the first place owner. Trading with second is usually a no-go, but I'll consider it. So he's talking about not the last place to first place. He's just talking about from fourth to second. I think there's nothing wrong with that, Fred.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I mean, if you don't want to do it because you just feel like you look at the standings and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm giving the guy in first a closer. If he gains 4 points and saves, I think we'll never catch him. I think that's fair. But I honestly look at the other team probably a lot less than most people do. I want to make a deal that makes sense for the other team. But once I establish that, then I'm mostly thinking about my own team because there's just so many variables. Like you could be like, oh, I'll never catch this team. They have Tyler Glasnow and Clayton Kershaw. You know what I mean? And I'll never catch them. And here we are a few weeks after I thought that, and they're both hurt. And now all of a sudden there's a window to catch them. So there's just so many variables, because we deal with such large rosters and there's so many injuries that I'm mostly just trying to think about making my own team more complete.
Yeah, Ruvain, you have any issues with it?
I don't have any issues except for the fact that I don't want to be on the end where you're in fourth place and you trade with the second place team and that trade puts them over the top and helps them win. That'll just be very frustrating. So I don't have a problem doing it as long as I think that I have the better chance of getting on the upside at the end. I mean, that's what everyone thinks when they're making a trade. But if you think that there's any possibility where the other team will benefit more than you will and they're above you in the standings, I would not do it. But if they're below you in the standings, it actually helps you because they can steal points from the teams that are above you.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm any owner in a league, I hate when people trade because essentially if the teams do it right, it helps both teams. And if it helps both teams, it hurts my team. So any trade not involving Ariel Cohen should theoretically hurt Ariel Cohen. So I'm always like, Darrell
but don't
asks,
veto. But don't veto them. Don't veto them for that reason. That's the wrong reason to veto a trade.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, we have we play in some leagues with some crazy guys. Anyways, Darrell asks, I'm trying to fill my last utility spot. Grossman, J.D. Davis, Conforto, McNeil are all options. 3 of 3 Mets. Which do you like rest of season? I think it's Conforto by a country mile. What do you agree?
Yep.
Yep. 100%.
Right?
100%.
Right.
Yep.
Next question. Carl asks, currently in last in a dynasty league due to injuries and some bad luck. I own Mike Trout, and I'm wondering if I should trade for a haul and what a good haul would be. Or should I hold and hope for a better 2022? I don't play in dynasty leagues. Do you play a lot of dynasty, Fred?
None, actually. No. I love one-year leagues. I'll be honest. I know a lot of the most serious players love dynasty leagues. I love one-year leagues. I love starting fresh every year. I love the newness of it. It's just to each their own scenario.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't have the time to get so involved in the minor leagues. And listen, the dynasty players, God bless them, they have a bigger understanding of the player pool than me. I make my money on the valuation, on the projections, on the auction strategy and theory. Going deep into knowing who the draft pick is for this guy, and he's in single A now, but he projects to be. I don't have the time to do that, so. I like doing redraft more, and I also like starting from fresh. But let's attempt to answer it anyways. If you're Trout and you're there, I think it really depends on the rest of your dynasty league, and it depends on what you think you can get back in Trout. I wouldn't go with the approach of what should I get back in Trout. I think that it depends on how good the rest of your team is. And what the market is for Trout right now. I mean, he's certainly injured, and I'd say you'd have to wait a little bit for him to get going, and maybe you can get a big haul. Certainly, if you're not close for 2022, I would trade it. If you're close, I mean, there's no better player than Mike Trout to have in your roster. That's how I would handle it.
Well, Trout is 29 years old. He was one of the top 5 picks this year. I think he's going to be one of the top 5 picks next year. He may even be another top 5 pick the following year. He still has another couple of very good years left in him. You'd have to get a really good haul
Yeah.
in order to trade him because you're going to be trading away a possible potential top 5 player for at least the next 3 years. You can't guarantee that in any dynasty league and any guy you're getting from single A or double A. Like, let's say hypothetically you're big on Jason Dominguez. A lot of people are big on him because he's this big guy. His nickname is the Martian. He's gonna be the next Aaron Judge. Would you trade Jason Dominguez and let's say a top pitching prospect for a proven commodity like Mike Trout? I can't see doing that.
It's very these dynasty questions tend to be very situation specific. That being said, I will say for Trout, like he's obviously like still arguably the best player in baseball. Although I know there's some young guys who could, like Tatis, could certainly take a run. Vlad can take runs at him and things like that right now. From a fantasy perspective, though, Trout doesn't steal bases anymore, and that matters a ton in fantasy. So if you look at going back to last season, 99 games. He's got 25 homers. Okay, so let's pace that out. So it's like a 40 homer guy, 43, 44 homer guy. So one of the most powerful players in baseball. But he's got 3 steals. So he's like a 5 steal guy. And he's about a 300 hitter in that stretch. So he's really good. He's a first round pick again next year. But he's not Tatis at this point in his career because he doesn't steal bases. I don't remember back to the question like if he specified the scoring format. But so my mind always goes to Roto. But in a Roto format, like I'd be open to trading Trout. I'd have to get a good haul, obviously, but I'd be open to it. I don't think I'd be open to trading Tatis.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do dynasty, but when I make projections and do valuations, it's a 1-year projection. I would imagine that to really do this correctly, you'd have to project out, but also you'd have to, in terms of valuation on your team, you'd have to sort of have a target of when is your target? Is you think that you're going to be good next year, in 3 years, and the values that you would want to trade players for and against would really have to be pitted against time. So it's a very, very complicated approach, really, to do it right. And 1-year projections are very highly variable. What do you think 3-year projections are? I mean, if I said to you, give me rankings of the next 5 years, just rankings, and let's do a draft. It's a really hard challenge. Just 5 years. Do you know who in 5 years from now are going to be the top 10? I bet you that if you pick 10 players, maybe 1 or 2 of them will actually be in the top 10. If that.
Right.
Eric's question is, how do we view Kelenick's value moving forward? Reuven and I have never heard of this guy, Kelenick, so maybe you can help us.
Who is he? I don't know who he is.
We're Mets fans, so we don't know who he is.
Well, he's supposed to be a good player, but he hasn't actually been one so far. So I'm at my wit's end with Kelenic, and I have him in some leagues. He just went to Coors Field for 2 games. I was like, this has to be it. Like, you have to get like 3 hits in those. Like, I was disappointed it was only 2 games, but I was like, you've got to get the 3 hits or a home run or something. How about 0 for 7, 3 strikeouts in the 2 games? I give up. I don't know what to do with him. I don't want to cut him.
Rest of season? I mean, if you're in a redraft league, I think his value depends on the size of your league, but if you're in a 10, 12-team league, I don't know that you really need to roster him in
10
in the
cut
redraft.
him. 10 I'm in 15, so 10 cut him.
15, it's close for the rest of the season.
His last home run was on May 24th. Like he didn't homer for a long time before he was sent down. He hasn't homered since he's been back. He's got 3 hits since he's been back in 5 games. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. I don't know. I'm going to wait till Sunday because at least I have until Sunday. I'm going to probably resist cutting him at least for a little bit. But
well, here's a better question. Who's going to have more value rest of season, Jared Kelenic or Wander Franco?
Franco, I guess,
so?
Yeah. And I would have never said that before. Yeah, Franco. I can't say Kelenic. I can't say Kelenic like over anyone right now.
No. I'd rather have Jose Iglesias in my roster.
Well, if you're going for a title, if you're tops in your league, you can't stomach Kalenic in your lineup. You have to bench him. In one of my leagues, I had him. In Wander Franco, I sat him because I'm somewhere near the top, and his batting average is killing me. Wander Franco's batting 200. He's batting
If you're in
200.
last place,
You got
you
nothing to
keep
lose.
you keep Kalanick. It's again the risk thing. There's upside, but I think that his median is pretty low. So if you're in last place, seventh place, eighth place, probably doesn't pay to cut him because maybe.
Yep.
If you're in first, second place, there is plenty more people who are more beneficial to your roster than Kalanick right now. Even 15 leaves in redraft. Dynasty keeper, totally different question. I'm not going to give up on him
Yeah.
just yet.
Bench spots also matter so much. Like if you're in a league with like 3 or 4 bench spots, or you have a lot of injuries, so you're basically down to 3 or 4 bench spots, then I don't know if you can keep them. Like say in an NFBC where you've got 7 bench spots, if your team's healthy and you can hold him in one of those 7 bench spots, almost treating him as like he's still in the minors and you're waiting. What you're really waiting for him is for him to come around rather than for him to be promoted. I could see that. I think that's might be how I handle him in my 15 team NFBC leagues. Is if I have injuries, he's gone. If my team's healthy and I've already got like 2 or 3 starters and a reliever. Also, after the trade deadline, it doesn't make as much sense to stash potential closers because there's not going to be any more trades. So, so some of those guys maybe you can drop. I'm going to have to look at it. If he makes it through, we'll see if he makes it through this Sunday for me. I'm not sure if he will. I kind of hope he does. I hope he does something to make me want to keep him.
Yeah, I was gonna say the question is, what would it take for him over the next 7 days for you to say, let's put him in the lineup?
Listen, before he went to Coors Field, he had a
Yeah.
3-game hitting streak. So he looked like he was starting to turn it around, and then he goes and it's a matter of him. I think he's pressing too much. I think he needs to get at least he needs to get a hit in the next 2 out of the 3 games to keep him on your roster, you think?
Yeah, but I mean, the 3-game hitting streak was 3 singles, and over those 3 games, he had 6 strikeouts and no walks. Like he's just, I don't get it. But he crushes it when he's in the minors. But the fact he steals bases makes him so potentially valuable, even down the stretch. If he could just get it going and hit like 240 with like a homer a week and a steal a week, like that would be amazing. So. Like I said, all he's got to do, first of all, I just want to see what he's got to do to stay on my roster, which is just show some signs of life during the weekend series, like a couple hits or something like that, some sign of life. And if he can make it to my roster through the trade deadline, the MLB trade deadline, then he'd have a better chance of sticking on it because waiver wires, like once we get past trade deadline, there's that initial surge, maybe the Sunday after that. If he can get through there, then maybe he could stick on it. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Why don't you try trading him then?
Because they're
That's an
NFBCs,
option.
so I can't trade them. Yeah, I don't have him in
any non-NFBC league. You should consider trading because you
Yeah.
probably get
Redraft.
something for him.
But in Dynasty, you should trade for him because you should trade for him now because his value is hurt for this year. People are down on him. Okay, I'll trade you. I'll trade Kelenic now. So it's a point to trade for him in Dynasty. In redraft though,
Yep.
yeah, -1 WAR in the year, 6 WRC plus. That means he's 94% below Major League average. Players who do not have a -1, Ariel Cohen has a 0 WAR. So does Ruvain. So does Fred Zinkie. So. It's not good if you have a -1 WAR. I mean, the team is letting him play through that to accumulate. He's hurting. Basically, the team has lost an entire game by playing him, is the theory. So there you go.
There's not like even his StatCast data. Like he has been unlucky, but his XBA is 181. Like he should. Like StatCast is saying he should be a 181 hitter.
It's still bad.
It's tough. But that being said, it's still all small samples, and this guy's super talented. He could turn around any time. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see if I keep him through Sunday. I wish I had him in a league where I could trade him away, but I don't.
For Met fans, it makes the trade look not as bad.
Yes, totally.
We'll see.
And fortunately or unfortunately, the Cano suspension also makes the trade look better.
Yeah.
Looks better. All right, Ruvain, injury report. Go for it.
Okay, well, let's start with those Mets. We'll start with Jacob deGrom, who is on the IL with forearm tightness. He said he will not return until his tightness has subsided, which means he doesn't have a current time frame. His MRI was clean. There's nothing wrong with it. And the last couple of days, he's actually been tossing at Citi Field, so he is throwing No issues yet, so we'll see how that goes. Another Met, Francisco Lindor, is on the IL with an oblique strain. The MRI showed a grade 2 oblique strain. They said it's not a day-to-day thing, it's more a week-to-week thing. His fill-in was Jose Peraza, but he broke his finger. So now the fill-in for him is Luis Guillorme and Jonathan Villar. So if those guys are available, Luis Guillorme, he's actually underrated. He's known for his defense, but he has a very good average if you look him up. And Jonathan Villar has over 10 home runs. He has 11 home runs, I think, this year. So if you need if he's available in leagues, pick him up because they're going to continue to get playing time. Nick Castellanos, who playing for the Reds, he was diagnosed with a right wrist microfracture seen only on CT scan. Now, we're assuming that happened during the course of his original injury, but he did come into that crazy 15-11 Mets win when he played them. He actually batted, he swung one-handed, and hit the ball to the right field warning track one-handed. It's very possible, I'm not saying it's true, but it's very possible that this microfracture may have occurred on the swing because now he can't swing. So the fact that he had this injury before and nothing was shown, now maybe this little thing, think of a bone like a piece of ice. Sometimes you can see those little tiny cracks, but sometimes you need a little more to get a little crack. Nick Castellanos, I don't know when he's going to come back. Shogo Akiyama is going to fill in and see some more playing time. Another guy who's been an MVP for a lot of fantasy teams is Brandon Crawford. He's on the IL with a left oblique strain. We don't know how long he's going to be out, and that's going to be an issue. And I want to mention one other guy, Zach Eflin. He was placed on the IL with right patellar tendonitis. He had surgery in 2016 to repair both of his knees because of a patella tendon issue, and it's a very strong possibility that his knees are acting up now. The Phillies aren't overly concerned. They said he may only miss 1 or 2 starts, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more. The Phillies haven't named anyone to take his place. They had a bullpen day for the first day he was there. The earliest he can be activated is July 28th. I don't know if that's going to happen. And 2 guys, I'm going to end it positive. You mentioned Alek Manoah earlier. He's supposed to come back next week. He had a back injury because he slipped on the stairs in the dugout. And Jazz Chisholm, he's also supposed to come back next week. He already was seen today doing grounders, and his shoulder seems to be okay, and he will come back next week after a couple of rehab games.
I suggested to pick up Aquino on the Reds before. Certainly with Castellanos out, that increases his playing time. I like that dart of Aquino. He can hit 20 homers. He's a dart. I have him in a quarter of my leagues or so. Very, very, very underrated for the risk potential upward. All right, Fred, this has been a fantastic show. I knew it would be. You just have a great mind for fantasy baseball. You think things analytically and very soundly. Great writer over at Yahoo. Do a fantastic job on the RotoWire podcast on Tuesdays with Jeff Erickson. What else did I miss with you?
I think that's about it. I think that and just being a dad and a husband is about the full extent of what I do. I write for Yahoo, and I get on the podcast for RotoWire every week with Jeff, and dabble in a lot of other fantasy sports too, not just baseball. But yeah, like you said, I really enjoyed this episode, and we'll make sure we do this again sometime.
Sounds great. You can follow Fred at Fred Zinkie MLB on Twitter. Ruvain, why don't you tell us what's going on for you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I retweet and tweet out injury updates that are going on in the league, how long I think they're going to be out based on my medical opinion, and who's going to take their spot when they are out. I also have an article coming out on a weekly basis at RotoBaller discussing all these injuries and more.
All right, my name is Ariel Cohen. You can read my work over at Fangraphs, Sportsline, and Rotoballer. I just had that article come out about the Maddox Plate Discipline Index. Take a look at a couple of undervalued starters and relievers based on that statistic that you may not have thought of. Check it out on Rotoballer. You can follow me on Twitter at ATCNY. And, of course, you can listen to me right here each week on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Once again, thank you so much, Fred Zinkie, for coming on the show, and to all of you out there, see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.